Welcome back to the podcast and to another edition of Two Blues Tuesday. Yes, as we promised, we are going to be on your screens every Tuesday night throughout the transfer window, hopefully without fail. And I am yet again joined by my co-host, Mr. C Money Picks, as we carry on last week's conversation, and aptly timed, may I just say, with Chelsea's mini transfer window coming to an end today. Deadline day is essentially on the cards, and we may well get a couple of updates while we're filming this episode. But kicking us off, last week we were looking at strikers. Which striker should Chelsea sign? We have already confirmed and signed Liam Delap, but there is still a lot of conversation going on with the Chelsea recruitment at the front and the back end. So I think we're going to have an episode for every single position, Charms. It looks like centre-back, left-back, goalkeeper. We're going to be able to cover absolutely everything in this mini-series, let's call it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like anyone that follows Chelsea, even people that don't follow Chelsea, they know how aggressive we can be in the transfer market. You know that we like to put our hand in our pocket, maybe not necessarily for the quality signings and spending 150 million there, but we do make a quantity of signings. So I wouldn't be surprised if we in a very short period of time. But yeah, very exciting for us. You know, nothing that we can complain about. Obviously, with Sancho not having his contract extended, I'm sure we'll get into that. But I think that very clearly leaves the possibilities for more transfers along that flank, particularly that left wing. And yeah, there's a lot more to come for us in the transfer window.
And that is, I mean, that's the best place to start, I think. Obviously, when you're looking at that left wing position, I think whether we sign someone or not this summer was massively hinging on Jadon Sancho. There were talks, obviously, Chelsea had the option to, trigger his loan move into a permanent for just what was it, 25 mil?
25,
Whatever it
25.
it was not a large fee. It was either that or pay Man United a 5 million fee to take him back. Seems like they couldn't come to an agreement on wages. Obviously, Jadon Sancho, for those who don't know, is on 300 grand a week at Manchester United. So between that and the 100,000 that Chelsea tend to kind of stick around as that mark for a younger player, there's a lot of room there and a lot of salary to be given up. So I do kind of understand from his perspective why he wouldn't have been sufficiently motivated. But at the same time, I feel like we made him feel at home. I feel like this was the happiest he looked in a long time, definitely since Borussia Dortmund. And I don't know, what do you make of that decision? Obviously not to trigger that.
Yeah, I mean, I think all things considered, what you have to really look at is how was he at Chelsea? And, I was impressed. I liked him, and let alone how the player felt. I think he was clearly happier. He was getting way more minutes than he was at United. I mean, he was getting minutes full stop. And he looked good in it. I think that the Chelsea fans are really behind him. Obviously, there's a reason he plays football professionally, and it's not because he likes playing football. It's because he wants to feed his family. And when in the end of the day, you're on a salary which is 3 times more than the salary that you're being offered to do 3 times less than what you're expected to do. I don't think it's a bad decision for him as a person or as an athlete. I just think that it's a shame that the sport essentially has got to this point where players are on 300k a week and aren't good enough to be playing football. We should have never got here in the first place. Unfortunately, we are, and yeah, we just have to count our chickens that we don't have millions of players in that. And people love to complain, particularly about Chelsea and the way that we budget and the way that we transfer it, how aggressive we are. But, as the report came out this week, we have the healthiest FSR in the league, FFP in the league. And there's no complaints about that. I think a lot of people were shocked by that. So, yeah, all things considered, I would have wanted the Sancho move. I think that he works well as a player for Chelsea. I think he was great off of that left wing and he showed that time and time again. But once again, on the wages that he's been demanded and not willing to take the cut, I completely understand how we've got to the situation we're in now.
And it is particularly difficult because, you look at it 6 months ago and we had a Jadon Sancho who had come to Chelsea and started scoring and assisting and looked like he was happy. We had 88 million Mudryk who was still on the cards. Coming out of this, we now, looking at that left wing position, it's crazy to kind of say that 3-4 years into this rebuild, we still haven't really nailed down a left winger. And obviously Noni Madueke in the latter stages of the season has kind of switched over to that side. And I personally am really, really impressed. And particularly with him also playing on the left under Thomas Tuchel. I think this is something that definitely has legs. Noni Madueke, a player who I've been singing his praises all season as to how far he's come. Yes, still a lot to be desired, particularly when it comes to end product in the final third. But I think decision making, I think everything about him has progressed this season, and I really, really like the way that he's moved forward as a player. Do you think getting in a player, because it does seem like Chelsea are dead set on signing a left winger, whoever it is, it seems like we are set on signing someone. Do you think that is a necessary addition to the squad this summer? Or given that we have Madueke, Tyreek George, and a couple of other players who are able, maybe it might not be their first position, but able to play that position, are you still prioritising a left winger, or is it something that you think we could do without for a season and then go in for next year?
I don't think it's necessarily about ignoring it for a season or just leaving it for a season and going in next year. I think it's more so what can Esteval do off of that wing. He's finally coming back into the fold, and we got me for the first time, and we need to see how that updates. You know what I mean? We need to see how he gets on in his progression. Maybe it is a move to Strasbourg, or we don't see him for a minute. But yeah, maybe we do go in for a left winger, but I don't think it's the type of position which we should look at and do the 90 million, 100 million pound signing. I don't think it would be necessarily relevant. And yeah, I think it would be difficult to get someone in who's going to work immediately. Obviously, there are a couple of rumours and whatnot that I'm sure we'll get into. There's a player that I've been very interested in for a while from a rival club, but there's a lot of reasons why that won't work. But yeah, I think that all things considered, it might not be a massive problem, but we do need a quality left winger, and we might have one there. And that's kind of where I'm resting my eggs a little bit, is in his ability as a very young Brazilian flary player, plays off of that left side, who's very good at beating fullbacks and making them look silly on his day. And if we could get that back, shades of Eden Hazard, I think it'd be extremely effective.
I mean, that's a completely different conversation. We could do a whole nother episode on that. Is where exactly does Esteval Willian fit in? Because, he plays off the right primarily for Palmeiras. He wants reportedly to play in the middle, and I don't see Cole Palmer being shifted out. Obviously, he's just been given the number 10, which is another reason we, could probably safely say Mykhailo Mudryk won't be part of the squad next season, sorry. But it is interesting. I think Esteval is, one of the few players. I say one of the few players. I think a lot of those players have the ability to play anywhere across the front line. And that was something that I was looking at as a big, big positive 2-3 years ago, even last season, because it gave us a little bit of fluidity, to be able to make those tactical tweaks, switch players over the wings. You don't never know who you're going to mark. I quite like that. But now it's got to a stage where I do feel like we've kind of nailed down our, certain players who are unmovables. Obviously, you've got your Cole Palmer, Moises Caicedo, Reece James, Cucurella. You have your spine, your base of the team. And now I do feel like it's time for Chelsea to be looking at specialists. Let's not be looking at someone that can, play left wing, right wing. Oh, it's great at ambidextrous, whatever. Let's go out and find, and this isn't in terms of the calibre of the player, more of the style of player. Let's go out and find a Mo Salah, a Bukayo Saka, someone that exactly what he's going to do every single time, but 8 times out of 10, he still gets away with it because he's just that good at it. And I do feel like Chelsea have got to that level where we've got all these great talents that can do, we love the word utilitarian on this channel. We've got players that can do 2-3 roles, but a lot of the time, and you saw it with Renato Vega, if a player isn't particularly comfortable playing in that position, it doesn't necessarily matter how well he's doing, how much the fans like him. If he's not happy, at the end of the day, the output isn't going to be 10-10, and he's more likely than not going to leave the club fairly quickly. So I do feel like, particularly when we're getting these youngsters in, and a lot of these top transfer targets are, again, very young players, I do feel like we have to be very, very, and this is something we've said for a while, we just have to be very, very careful with how we balance this squad now. All this conversation about goalkeepers this week. Reports coming out today that the Maignan deal's fallen apart, and Chelsea, Enzo Maresca never asked for a goalkeeper. He's happy with the 4 goalkeepers he's got. Number one, shouldn't even have 4 goalkeepers. Should be happy with the 2 that we've got in rotation. Number 2, sorry. I doubt he is happy if the sporting directors are actively going out and looking for goalkeepers. It does kind of prove that that there is some sort of disharmony between the management and the sporting directors. And I do kind of, I do feel similar to you. It's not a priority left wing, but I do feel like even though Enzo Maresca feels he has the talent and the ability at his disposal, it does feel like something that is going to be overhauled by the sporting directors. But getting into the top transfer targets. So we will run through, as we did last week, we're going to run through 5 top transfer targets. I know last week it was kind of 4 and Alexander Isak as a benchmark. You could similarly say there are 4 here and an unrealistic one that we're not going to go through. But we are also going to go through a few wild cards at the end. We ran out of time last episode, but this is something that I'm keen to do and just throw a few wild cards in there. A few names that maybe we've heard, maybe have been rumoured. Few names that we haven't been rumoured and we'd like to see. And obviously, great opportunity for you guys to get your thoughts in the comments as well. Let us know what you think, not only of the players that Chelsea are linked to, but also who would you go for if you could choose a left winger? But starting us off, Charms, with the man that has been spoken about by far the most this week and obviously today. Now, last we'd heard Chelsea had made a second bid for Jamie Bynoe-Gittens today, which had been rejected immediately. I believe that was in the region of £52 million. Looks like they're holding out for 60, 70 mil. And it's another club that I feel is using this little Club World Cup window against us. I'm not, the more I see and the more I think and read about this Jamie Bynoe-Gittens deal, or Jamie Gittens deal, sorry, I'm just not sure. I don't know what it is. I just don't feel he's a large enough upgrade on the players that we've got at the moment. And I don't know if you can echo that.
Well, I mean, listen, there's a side of me that really likes the transfer, side of me that's worried about it. I think that there's definitely bags of ability in the player, obviously being young and being English. I think that helps his case a lot to boost that transfer up. Money wise, but like if we are to pull the trigger around that 70 million, there is definitely that pressure to perform. And I feel like we've seen a lot of players come in and not really take to that pressure. And I feel like, when you're looking at a player like that around the 70 million, and then you look at a player like Tyreek George, and then you compare the two and you think about like, do we spend 70 million to upgrade that position when we have a player who we can rotate into that role? And we have players like Pedro Neto who can play either side. And Madueke has shown himself, and for that amount of money, as you said, is it worth the difference? In terms of the footballing ability, and listen, he could be a special player, but when we went in for 30, I was like, good. I think that's a great deal. And when we went for 52, I said I can understand it. But when that gets immediately rejected, the wording around the situation has been very aggressive. It's been very much so. No, we're not doing anything anywhere close to that number. And that worries me. That we will just pull the trigger on something like we did with Mykhailo Mudryk. We kind of overvalued him, and then he came to the club and kind of underperformed. And we were just waiting and waiting and waiting for those performances, and they never arrived. And there is a world where that happens with Jamie Gittens and the player he is. He's a very confident player. He likes to beat a man. He's very quick. I think he kind of reminds me of Jadon Sancho, to be honest. And we can use that, and we've shown that last season that we can utilize that style of player. But yeah, it's definitely, as I was saying, as I don't think left wing is a crazy large priority for us at the minute. Just spending that much on a player like that right now, I just feel like it's just a bit much.
Yeah, and I misspoke. It's not 52. It was 42 that we offered, and it was rejected immediately. It's 54 that they're apparently asking for. However, in the last hour, it has come out that the move has collapsed in terms of being done before the Club World Cup. So the general consensus is that Chelsea will try again after the window reopens next Monday, but they will not overpay for Gittens, and they know Dortmund will sell the player this summer, and he wants to move to Chelsea. This is something that we discussed actually very briefly, because I am very, very strongly opinionated on this. But with clubs happening twice in 2 days, with AC Milan and Borussia Dortmund saying to us both times, we hold all the cards, this is what you've got to pay. If you don't want to pay it, jog on. How much does a player get a say in a move these days, do you feel?
Well, this is the thing, right? So I feel like it's a lot more relevant now than it has been. I think that in the past we've looked at players as almost like playing cards, where they just kind of make the transition, and there were a lot of unhappy transfers, but shut up and get on with it. And I feel like that shut up and get on with it mentality, it's lost in today's game. I feel that there is a lot of like a lot of whinging and a lot of care about emotions and how people feel, and they forget that there is six-figure weekly salaries on the line here, and this is insane levels of money. And when a player like Jamie Gittens or Mike Maignan says that they want to move, it pretty much confirms that the player will move, because no club wants a player at their club that doesn't want to play there. When it comes to what club he moves to, I think that becomes relatively irrelevant, because the club don't really care. It's just who's going to bite the hand with the largest mouth. So it is nice to hear that I want to come to Chelsea from Jamie Gittens, and I think that could definitely boost the relationship, particularly with his agent and the club, and getting that across the line at like a solid deal, and not overpaying his wages. That definitely helps. When a player wants to, it makes it easier. It's not the be all and end all, but once you've said them words out your mouth, you're not wanted by the club. And if a player like Lukaku at Chelsea said, "I'm not happy playing at Chelsea," it's not, bless him. Like, I understand the stress. It's get the fuck out of my club now. Simple. And I think we've seen that a couple of times. They're starting to see that a couple of times. Dortmund have started to see that. Milan are seeing that now with Maignan. And this is not the first time Dortmund have gone through this. They've had many, many, many players say, "Listen, it's my time to move on, and this is the club I want to go to." And they've honoured it. And a lot of the time, it's been to Bayern Munich. Mario Götze was a similar situation. He wanted to leave to Bayern Munich. So it's not unheard of. But as you said, like, you don't think it plays too much relevance. I definitely do when it comes to the actual deal crossing the line and what the deal is. Because if the player doesn't want to move and then a Man City come in, he'd rather just play for them, because he's got no loyalties to either club. They're going to play more, probably play me less. So,
Yeah, I just feel, and this is probably particular to Chelsea, I just feel like clubs know they can price us out. How many times does it happen with Brighton? And, they know that realistically we have the capabilities. Even if we don't want to, we're probably going to pay the fee. We're just going to, amortize it over 5 years or whatever. So I think Dortmund in this situation definitely hold all the cards. We've made it very clear that we've put two bids in before this deadline. They know that we're trying to sink our teeth. They know that we are actively going after this player. And I feel like with the Maignan deal, that's definitely one that we should step away from, because, he's got a year left on his contract. It's one of those where I'm thinking, 29-year-old goalkeeper, how long are we going to get out of him anyway? It'd be great to have a season, 2 seasons, but I'm not going to try and overpay for a player that, like you said, is not a massive priority at this point. And this is specific to Gittens, because obviously keeper for me is a lot more of a priority. But when I look at, Bynoe-Gittens compared to Noni Madueke in particular, I do feel like, you can look at their stats, fairly similar. I think Bynoe-Gittens has played way more minutes than Madueke last season. Obviously, he had Champions League and stuff, whereas we were rotating in the Conference League. But in terms of output, I just feel like when I see Bynoe-Gittens, I should stop calling him Bynoe-Gittens because he's now just Gittens. When I see
wait, what? How
Gittens,
come? Where is that? Where did that? When did that happen?
it's one of those, you've got a double-barreled surname because of your mum and dad, and then you disown your dad, so you want to go with your mum's side. Something like that. I imagine, or vice versa. But what I do see with him, and this is where I struggle as well, because in this Chelsea side, the only player that wants to go at people is Noni Madueke. And Jamie Gittens is perfect. That is his main attribute. That is his main strength, is 1-on-1v1 ability, dribbling. And I do look at this Chelsea team, and particularly with Madueke, because he frustrates both of us. He frustrates the entire Chelsea fan base week in, week out, because we know what he can do. And I do feel like if you have someone with that level of ability, with a bit more confidence and will to go forward, and now we've got Delap, I do feel like there is the chance for a lot more to be created off that left side. But essentially my kind of main gripe with this move, and again with all the players that we've been linked to, is Madueke's 23. These players that we're signing are 21, 22, 20. They're all, again, not immediate massive upgrades. And I think if Gittens was to come into Chelsea and oust Madueke immediately, I think he'd be fuming. I think he'd leave.
Yeah, yeah, I can hear it.
But it is, again, it's the danger of having this, large squad. Man management is not, an aspect of the job that I envy from Enzo Maresca. So if he can manage to fit in another winger and keep them happy, fair enough. I just don't see a situation that doesn't echo last season, whereby you've got João Felix and Nkunku, and neither of them are happy, and neither of them are getting minutes, and then at the end of the season, it's at 80 million plus down the drain.
Well, just on that topic about 80 million down the drain, I know we've got a lot to speak about, but obviously with Mudryk's number being given to Cole Palmer and nothing really coming out about Mudryk, I mean, a lot of people are still questioning what's going on with him. I mean, he is a winger with a great valuation on him, a lot of potential. Uh, we It's radio silence, and that worries me, and I'm sure that that worries you. You know, it's something that we said last week was confusing. Right by now, especially after the number was changed, you had messaged me saying this is not a good look for Mudryk, and it really isn't. But say he does come out and he is, you know, proven innocent or whatever, and he doesn't have the big rap sheet about him, and he is able to integrate himself back into the Chelsea squad. Is that a player that you would think would need to move on, or someone that we could look as still as a project player 5 years on?
Oh no, definitely. I would definitely give him another chance. I'd like to see him. Just number one, to see how he's been looking after himself. Because what I haven't heard much about him because obviously he's staying off social media. He's not allowed to go to the Chelsea training ground, but he has been spotted quite a few times at the athletics track near his house in Fulham. It seems like he has been keeping fit, keeping active, just in the case that he does get brought back into the fold. And that is another eventuality. We could go out and sign another winger for 60, 70, 80 million this summer. Deadline day, the deadline closes. September the 1st comes along, and the FA go, yep, false positive, he can play again in 2 months. And you're like, oh, crap, hang on a minute. I've got an £88 million or 60 million, whatever we paid for him player that we've got to work back into the squad. But I would say gut feeling, yeah, unfortunately, as much as I would love him to come back and have another opportunity, I do feel like Mudryk's chapter at Chelsea is most probably closed. But moving on to another target, and this is someone that I think interest has died down in. It seems like Arsenal have potentially become the front runners in this. But another big money move. Rodrigo of Real Madrid has reportedly been made available for sale. This was reported quite a while ago from the kind of Madrid pages. But Chelsea were one of the clubs, or one of the main Premier League clubs, interested in signing Rodrigo, reportedly. Obviously, main issue there is the fee. It's going to be absolutely gargantuan. But what do you make of Rodrigo as a player, and in terms of his ability, could he translate it into the Prem?
I don't like him. Simple. I think he's very overrated. I've watched quite a bit of Rodrigo, and he gives me that Ansu Fati vibes. It's a lot of thrills and a lot of fun when it's working, but when it's not working, where does he go to? And I feel like he disappears quite a bit. I feel like that being at Real Madrid, it's a big deal, and obviously he held down a starting spot for a minute. But I just think that the ability of the player is just not up to the level that people think it is, and quite frankly, I think that he's the type of player that they would want 90 million, 100 million for, and I couldn't make that make sense. And once I couldn't even try to understand the argument, to be totally honest. I think it's chalk and cheese in terms of good transfer. I think that this has got bad transfer written all over it. He hasn't proven himself on the biggest stage. He's not consistent. He gets injured. He plays in the Spanish league. It's not up there for me, man. And as much as he's got a great side around him that obliterate teams on his day, Rodrigo is not the player that, once again, I think a lot of people think he is. And I think the idea of Rodrigo is really interesting. The concept of that Brazilian Real Madrid left winger who's really tricky and really young. But in reality, he just lacks the end product. Too focused on getting around people and playing a nice pass rather than just playing the football that's been given to him. And yeah, as you can tell, I'm not a big fan of this move. And it's very rare that you hear me so passionately disinterested in a transfer. But yeah, this is one I want us to stay far clear from.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not quite so passionate, but I'm definitely there with you. I think the inconsistency is not something that I'm keen to bring over, particularly when you are talking about, yeah, like you said, 80, 90, 100 mil. The interest, and I find this fascinating though. I always love to go back to this. So Rodrigo, and it's interesting you said there is not a big game player. He is arguably the biggest anomaly in world football. In 172 games in La Liga, he scored 32 goals. In 64 Champions League games, he scored 25. He's nearly scored the same amount of goals in a third of the games. This is a guy that turns up in the Champions League. I find that absolutely fascinating that he has less than a third of the minutes, but virtually the same output in terms of goals in the Champions League.
Honestly, that's probably where the hype comes from. Simple, because you
It
can't
is.
bang against Elche, but then you get a solid goal in a group stage match against Bodo Glimt. Fair enough.
It's when
Can't blame
it's when
you.
he's got all eyes on him. But it's not the first time we've been linked to a high-profile target for Real Madrid. Because I mean, how much weight there was to the rumours and how much truth, I do not know. But we were linked pretty heavily to Vinny Jr. last year and again in January. So I do kind of. It does make me wonder, even though we've both said it's not a priority, it's not something I would do. It does make me wonder whether they are looking for a Galactico-esque signing in that left side. And it does kind of make me think, even though I wouldn't pay these fees for these players, it does make me think that they might actually be doable.
Yeah.
Another player who will undoubtedly cost a lot of money, and again, I think we're both very much in the same boat on this. And it is reports or interest has reportedly waned mainly due to his attitude. But Alejandro Garnacho looks dead certain to leave Manchester United this summer. They need to recoup as much money as they can. So if they sell him to a Premier League rival, that's minimum 75, 80 mil. Is Garnacho a player? I mean, obviously, give me your thoughts on him to Chelsea first, but in general, what do you think of Garnacho and how he's kind of spoken about? Because obviously he was grouped last year with Doué, Yamal, and 12 months on, you cannot put them in the same conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's difficult for anyone in that Man United squad to really be compared to the peers that they should be. I think that Bruno Fernandes is a fantastic and on his day a world class 10. But I don't think that you can say that when for a guy who's the 10 of a club that came 17th, and nothing to show for it in the season. So I think that Garnacho is definitely a victim of his circumstance. It's a player that I've really enjoyed watching over the last 2 years. I think that he's got a lot of quality and a lot of depth to him that people don't necessarily realise. I think that he's very confident on the wing. I like his ball carrying ability. I think he's got solid passing range. So definitely a player that I've been interested with. And when it comes to a move to Chelsea, I can hear it. I honestly can. Like when it comes to the actual ability of the player, I would like that. I think that it works and it
Really?
makes up for the Sancho profile that we had last season. That was very effective when we were in between two tournaments. My only problem with it, and probably the dead set reason why I don't want this transfer to cross the line, is a blend of his attitude, which apparently stinks. I've heard that from many, many, many sources at United. That's not what we need in our dressing room. Our dressing room is very collected. The Mandem FC thing, it's funny and whatnot. But in the end of the day, we've got a lot of young and very mature people in our club, the likes of a Wes Fofana and a Romeo Lavia, personality Caicedo. They're way more mature than they should be for their age. And I don't see that from an Alejandro Garnacho. And say what you want about tricky South American winger. He's going to have a bit of pizzazz. You want him to have a little bit of attitude. I think it kills the vibe. And at the 70 million that you said, that's the exact figure that I thought that they would want to get rid of him for, around that 70, 75, 80 million bracket. And I just, once again, for the player that we'd be getting for that money, I find it very difficult to justify the transfer. So as much as I have a personal interest in the player, and I've been very evident and very expressive of that on this podcast for a long time now, I think that the idea of Garnacho works, but in reality, when all things are said and done, you can't just look at the footballing ability. You have to look at the footballer, and he just would not integrate into this team well. And if he did, I think it would cause problems long term.
Agreed. Yeah, it's not something that I've got any interest in, and that's not again not to say anything about his quality. I do think he's got a lot of potential there, but yeah, I don't see an improvement on the players that we already have,
Yeah.
and yeah, the attitude thing is very very clear to me. There's been problems all season with his brother on social media. There was a video the other day of them all doing balloons and stuff. It's just it's something, what? It's like I kind of said last week, or we kind of said last week about Osimhen, having, Mikel and all the podcasters attached. You just don't want the noise. It just gives them an outlet to complain. And if he hasn't managed to do it under Amorim, who's supposedly a great man manager and has sung his praises all season, yeah, I don't see him coming into this Chelsea side and being a success. And similarly, another player that has been seemingly ruled out, but because of his higher wages, not his attitude. But Nico Williams is a weird one because this is a player that everybody wants, but
Yeah.
nobody wants to pay the 300,000 a week for. And it's very, very obvious that that's why, because he's got exceptionally high wages and obviously he doesn't want to leave because it's a boyhood club. Do you see a player worth that value? Because he's been a top talent, a potential for quite a few years now, Nico Williams.
I think that, he's got what, a 53 million euro release clause as well. He's very affordable when it comes to
51
actually
mil, yeah.
getting the player in. So I think that I think that when you look at his affordability and then you look at the wages, it is definitely that creates the problem. If he had half the wages, but it was a 75 million euro transfer, I think a lot of people wouldn't really think too much of it. But when you look at the way that Chelsea structure their contracts, the 7, 8, 9 years, if he is a fantastic player, kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, paying him over the odds every single year, and if he wants a contract extension, it's only going to be more brutal. I think that, once again, the heart's not necessarily too in it. He's open to the idea of a move, but happy at the boyhood club and on the wages he's on. We're going to have to make the impossible happen to make that transfer across the line. And as much as I do think Nico and Inaki, I think both of them are quality. I think Nico's the better of the two, and I think that we saw that in the Euros final. You can't just go off of one game, but that's the biggest game. Well, arguably a top three most important game in world football. I'd say it's the World Cup, the Champions League final, then the Euros final. And to perform at that level at that age, that level of just switch off and do it. I think it was incredible. And if he does make the move to Chelsea, obviously that's something I'm more than welcome. I think he's a great player, and yeah, I'd be happy with it. But it just, with everything included, the money, the emotive nature behind the move, I just don't see it crossing the line. Just something will stop it.
Yeah, my line of questioning, I was thinking surely we can amortize it into the price tag, but 15.6 million pounds a year in salary is
Yeah,
it's not a small fee. Also reminds me fucking Victor Osimhen turned down 970,000 pounds a week tax free.
Batter, he's an absolute donut. Is he out of his mind?
What are you doing? You
Why
play
do you
in
play for?
Turkey, brother. Oh
You know what I
my
mean? And it's
God.
not like the level difference between like Turkey and Saudi. He's like really changing, like his career trajectory. Your career's fucked, mate. You play for fucking Gala. They're not good. They're not good.
He could have done 6 months and disappeared off the face of the earth, and
What a
he
village
would have
in
been a very happy
Nigeria and
man.
disappeared. Yeah,
Absolutely bizarre. But let's get on to the final top transfer target. We will rattle through the wild cards on the end of this as well. But final transfer target, and I've got to say, out of these five, this is my pick. He is probably one of, if not the most expensive, maybe bar Rodrigo on the list. But if I was going to go for an attacking player, and this completely contradicts what I
contradict.
was saying earlier about a player that can play 2, 3 roles, but Morgan Rogers. I think if you're looking at this list and you're going for a player who can, as you mentioned earlier, make an immediate impact, fit in with the team, and has already shown us that he has and can do it. Morgan Rogers, breakout star of the 24-25 season. Obviously, 23-24 made a big splash as well. But this year, he was superb. Obviously, Champions League, Premier League. This is a guy that could do it all. And with Chelsea adding ex-Man City Academy graduates, Liam Delap, and obviously to Lavia, Enzo Maresca, Cole Palmer. Is this something that you could see as a potential reunion? Because I can't lie, I'm getting a little bit of a gut feeling that Rodgers could come to Chelsea if Aston Villa have to sell for PSR.
Well, I mean, it was exactly what I was going to say. I mean, he's very, very familiar with the Chelsea contingent, those young players that are in there. I think it was the Man City Academy that they were all in. And there's pictures of them left and right. They have a very good friendship, the type of friendship they comment on each other's Instagram posts. And I know it's something little, but playing with your friends at this higher level, playing football with people that you like, and it's not just a clocking job, it changes the perspective. And mentality is huge, specifically in modern football. Now, you look at the player himself, what does he offer? Well, he offers the ability to play off the left, in the 10, on the right, and up top. He pretty much fills that whole attacking triangle, particularly in the 10 and on the left. I like Morgan Rogers as a striker, which it might not have been something you would have expected me to say, but I've always thought that he's a striker that's been made to push back because of the Oliver Watkins situations, because he's got Ollie Watkins right in front of him and that's their star man. He's not able to blend himself into the position that really makes him stand out. But then you look at a side like Chelsea and you look at our striker. Who's our striker? Well, he's arguably better off the left. You know what I mean? And Nicholas Jackson, he's arguably better as a winger than he is as a bagsman. So I think that, as you put it before, those moving cups of players, Morgan Rogers fits really well into that. And that confusing, baffling line of when we're going up against lines of defence is that way that we can switch teams. We've seen it in live action a few times. I think that second game against Fulham at Craven Cottage was the perfect example of it. We were able to really switch our wingers at the 70 minutes, and we had all the defenders off what was going on. And by the end of it, it was Neto that had just made a run straight down the middle and just popped it into the back of the net, just hoofed it. And he played off the left for most of that game. And because we were making those tactical adjustments, we made 3 more points, which ultimately got us back into Europe. So I think Morgan Rogers fits into that role. Obviously, the money is in and around that same figure. But as you said, if we're going to spend that money, I want it to be spent wisely. I want it to be spent on a player who's going to be able to provide. And I think that Rodgers can do that. And where I don't necessarily think that we should go in for him, I think that if we do go in for him and we do get him, I think that there is a lot of positives that we can draw in the future. It's just, once again, left wing, not a crazy priority for me at the minute. But yeah, if we are going to prioritise it, I'd be very happy and very impressed with the board for going with a Morgan Rogers.
If you had to put a price tag on him, what would you value him at?
Realistically, I'd value him around that 60 million because I think he's a very good quality player. And particularly at Aston Villa, what he showed in the Champions League last year as well, it's very difficult for players to just adjust like that. But realistically, in today's market, he's probably more on the 75-80 side of things.
Yeah. The thing with Rodgers is I think he's definitely more effective inside. And the way that Chelsea set up is interesting. It's counterintuitive because we obviously play extremely wide. We've got the wide men, but we don't use the overlap, the overlapping fullbacks. It's all about tucking in and inverting. So,
But
as whoever it was, Jill Scott, Eni Aluko, whoever it said, if we're going to play with 2 10s, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have Cole Palmer and Morgan Rogers in behind Liam Delap. I think that is a pretty devastating front or central 3. But we have unfortunately run out of time to go through our wildcards. But you know what? We'll probably put together a wildcard episode because obviously didn't get a chance to do it with the strikers. And that conversation is still very much on the cards. So make sure to stay tuned to the Two Blues podcast. We're going to be back next Tuesday. We will be back before then with more content, but back Tuesday for the next Two Blues Tuesday. Let us know in the comments who you would sign. If you had to pick one winger, who would you sign? Make sure to like, comment, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, at Two Blues Podcast on the Instagram and the TikTok.